The GOP versus Math. By Andrew HarrerBloombergGetty Images. To sell their tax plan, congressional Republicans and the Trump administration have constructed an impressive alternate reality. Getting rid of the estate tax is great for farmers if the bill passes as written. Donald Trump will get killed financially. Tax cuts will pay for themselves. Trickle-down economics works. But on Thursday night, the GOP came face-to-face with something they can't fib their way out of, and that could very well doom their holy grail: math. While it was fairly obvious from the start that the plan put forth by the Senate would blow a hole in the deficit, violating Senate rules, it wasn't until last night that the size of that hole became evident. According to the official score released by Congress' Joint Committee on Taxation, the bill would add $1.5 trillion to federal budget deficits over the next 10 years, with the biggest annual deficit, $216.7 billion, occurring in 2027. This is a major problem because, in order for the bill to pass the Senate with a simple majority, parliamentary rules require the legislation does not produce any revenue losses after a decade. While Mitch McConnell and co. will insist that the final version is still being hammered out, this isn't a matter of coming up with a few billion here and there. The deficit Republicans are grappling with is so massive that even dropping the corporate tax cut, the heart and soul of the GOP plan, wouldn't be enough to offset revenue losses elsewhere. Senate Republicans, desperately scrounging among the nation's couch pillows for loose change, have located about $1 trillion they believe they can raise by scrapping state and local tax deductions. But numerous House Republicans in high-tax blue states, which would be disproportionately affected by the change, have said that would be a non-starter. So what's a party that's hung its electoral hopes and dreams on tax cuts to do? One way Senate Republicans could subvert reality would be to ask someone like Reaganite Larry Kudlow to score their bill, knowing full well that he'll tell them it will produce more revenue through growth, thereby skirting the so-called Byrd rule. Or they could rip up the bill and rewrite it so that, say, instead of phasing tax cuts out after 10 years if they add to the deficit, they're phased out after 40. Either option, however, would mark a radical revision of parliamentary rules, something that Mitch McConnell and his colleagues, for all their procedural improprieties, are loath to do. And changing the rules so that the majority party can, effectively, pass whatever it wants, is probably not a great idea when Democrats, fresh off major electoral victories in Virginia and New Jersey, are hoping to recapture Congress in 2018. If you would like to receive the Love and Report in your inbox daily, click here to subscribe. Entitlement reform next. If Republicans can get their collective act together and find a way to cut taxes, GOP logic dictates that entitlements, as Paul Ryan affectionately refers to them, maybe next budget shortfalls from cuts, have led many, like the Tax Policy Center's William Gale, to predict that cuts to entitlement programs and the social safety net could be just around the corner. After all, cutting taxes is expensive, and losing provisions like the AMT could cost the government $440 billion in lost revenue over a decade. Indeed, the budget resolution, a series of recommendations, as Vox notes, that makes tax reform possible, suggests social safety net services be cut to offset lost revenue. Medicare spending would be cut by almost $500 billion. In the next 10 years, non-Medicare healthcare spending by $1.3 trillion by 2027, and other unspecified entitlements would see another $1 trillion in cuts, all programs that are mostly geared to the elderly and the poor. This would truly be Ryan's birthday, Christmas, and a solid PX90 sweat all rolled into one. When Mitch McConnell said nobody in the middle class would receive a tax increase, he didn't mean nobody in the traditional sense of the word. Apologies for the confusion. As written, the Senate bill would break a vow that the Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, made on MSNBC last week when he declared that nobody in the middle class is going to get a tax increase. It would also break President Trump's promise that rich people, such as him, would not benefit from a Republican tax plan. On Friday, Mr. McConnell said he had misspoken in his MSNBC appearance. He said that every income group would see a tax cut on average, not that every individual would do so. You can't guarantee that absolutely no one sees a tax increase, Mr. McConnell said. According to analysis of the Senate bill by the New York Times, approximately 25% of middle-class families would see their taxes increase in 2018, by an average of $1,000. By 2026, roughly a third of middle-class families would see an increase of about $1,600. But hey, 2/3 is basically nobody, right? Is Venezuela just messing with its creditors? Based on the team it has assembled to head up one of the most complex bond restructuring efforts ever, one might get that impression. As Venezuela runs out of cash, President Nicolas Maduro last week appointed a six-man commission to negotiate a deal regarding up to $150 billion of the country's outstanding foreign debt. The composition of the commission, none have significant training in economics or finance and two are targets of U.S. sanctions, suggests to some observers that the government isn't really seeking to restructure its debt, but rather to create a situation in which it can blame a default on the sanctions. Thin on debt restructuring experience, at least some of the commissioners could pad out their CVs with long legal disclaimers instead. The commission's leader, Vice President Tariq El-Aissami, is on Washington's drug kingpin list. Another member, Finance Minister Simon Zerpa, who has a degree in political science, is under U.S. sanctions for alleged corruption. Both have denied the allegations in the past. One member, Planning Minister Ricardo Menendez, a former geography professor, has long advocated turning the country into an agglomeration of worker communes. Another, Agriculture Minister Wilmar Soltado, a retired military officer, oversaw the collapse of food production in Venezuela's former breadbasket state of Portuguesa, which he governed. It looks like political theater, Eurasia Group analyst Riza Graistargo told the Wall Street Journal, while a Latin American-based investor who holds Venezuelan debt characterized the effort as a waste of time. This is just an exercise to lay the groundwork for a default and point to the sanctions as the culprit. Equifax decides executive bonuses would be a bad look in an almost comical series of disastrous moves. The credit reporting company failed to protect the highly sensitive data of nearly half of all Americans, initially barred those trying to find out if they'd been affected by the breach from participating in class action lawsuits, sent people to a phishing site and either didn't tell three senior executives about the hacking for days, or employed three senior executives who dumped their stock in a move that looked a lot like insider trading. In short, it can't get anything right, which is why it's equal parts surprising and good to hear someone at Equifax pointed out that 2017 bonuses might not be great optics. Equifax is scrapping executive bonuses and suspending share buybacks as the U.S. credit reporting company counts the cost of one of the most serious data breaches in corporate history. Speaking on Friday after Equifax released its first financial results since the cybersecurity scandal came to light, executives warned investors to brace for a mounting bill as lawsuits pile up and a raft of regulators investigate the company. In the wake of a public outcry, Equifax, which handed 5 senior managers $17 million worth of incentive awards last year, is axing payouts for executives including interim chief Paulino do Rego Barros. In other Equifax news, earlier this week do Rego Barros told a congressional panel he wasn't sure if, after everything, the company was encrypting consumer data, so nixing the bonuses was probably a good idea. Elsewhere, a gun black stock market warning comes true. Bloomberg Hampton's home buyers have already figured out how to game the tax plan. Bloomberg's so-called Trump of Georgia is on a crusade against Wall Street. Business Insider stock market fall not the big one, says Bank of America. Reuters show a West Coast trading network spawned a New York pension fund scandal. WSJ economists see few monetary policy changes with Powell leading Fed. WSJ Bitcoin plunges after plans for split called off. Bloomberg's 20% club hedge fund stars of an industry rebound. Reuters peer-to-peer loans remind the Cleveland Fed of an obscure historical episode known as the subprime mortgage crisis. Dealbreaker alleged thief hands out donuts to customers during robbery. MSN